Hey everybody, so today we have Amit Jilka with us. So Amit, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
My name's Amit Jilka. I'm the co-owner, I should say, with my wife of Abbey House Dental. We've owned the practice since 2012, and we've grown it from one practice to four practices across two kind of distinct areas.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, so you guys are absolutely smashing it at the moment, making a big name for yourselves in the
Thank you.
Midlands. And when we look back, so how long did it take you to do that? Go from one practice to four practices.
So it took 12 years. We opened up our first practice, like I said, in 2012. And then
Was that a squat or was that did you buy a practice?
we bought the practice. It had a 7,000 UDA contract, and it was I'd say a one surgery practice with a small hygiene room. So it was very small. And when I was very young at the time, I was 27, 28. So didn't really want to take on a big burden and didn't have much money behind me because I just finished a Max Fax post. And so we didn't have too much money. So we bought this practice. And really, the vision really is to try and grow it to a four surgery practice. And that was it, really. But it just kept going and going. And then we eventually bought a second one in 2019, and outgrew that one. And then we bought another one in 2021. And then we've recently launched our new one last year. So it took us about 11 years to get to where we are.
Yeah, great. And so, if you just rewind then back to your first practice, you said you were quite young when you bought that practice, what, 27, 28? Is that right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
what made you want to go into practice ownership so young then at that point, especially coming out of a Max Fax position?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think having both me and my wife, we both grew up in the typical Indian corner shops. So we always had the business mindset. We always wanted to own because our parents had owned shops. So I think we both went through university and we did graduate together, me and my wife. So we both wanted to own a business. But the practicalities of doing that, we didn't really know and understand. So when we qualified, my wife did a VT post and then moved on to do an NHS post. Whereas I love surgery, so I went straight into Max Fax. And I was at the point where I was just needing to make a decision. Do I want to do Max Fax and do medicine? And at the time, they were giving us a 3-year degree in medicine to convert your degree to Max Fax. And I thought I just recently got married, didn't have much money, and I didn't really want to go down the route of going back to university. So then I got a job offer at Birmingham Dental Hospital for an oral surgery post. And then I thought, I've just done 1 year of Max Fax. What am I going to get out of the oral surgery post? So I made the decision to say, right, we're just going to buy a practice. Let's just go for it. So I was an associate for about a year. But in that 1 year time frame, we put an offer in for a practice that was about an hour away from where we live. And it was a small practice that we thought we could cope with. And that was it. The passion was always there, I think, from the onset, really.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that. And, I've looked back on my own story quite a bit. When people ask me, why have you ended up buying a practice? There's loads of different factors that come into it. But one of the biggest things is that, I've realized for ourselves, and this happens for, I think, quite a lot of families, especially from Asian heritage. When we're young, a lot of our parents, didn't come from a lot, or they came from different countries and moved here. And then they ended up setting up businesses. Like I said, my parents had businesses, they had fish and chip shops and then corner shops. And then that led into other businesses. But it was like seeing that whole journey, like we lived it from when we were kids, like all the way through.
Yeah.
And it's like, we don't know anything different. And the reason why, I feel like I've ended up setting my practice and, I couldn't stay as an associate is ultimately because that's what I've seen my whole life. And that's what I've seen my parents do. And it's like, it was almost embedded in me that I was going to do that.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly it. I don't think I really thought it through. And certainly when we bought the practice, the first year was very difficult because I think the things that we struggled with was staff and HR and all of those sides that we don't really get trained as dentists to do. The dentistry was the easiest part, I would say. It was actually running the business, knowing how to do the staff hours, knowing how to do associate pay. All of these things are just thrown at you, and they start eating up into your home life, your family life, your evenings, your weekends, and you just got to get on with it and just do it.
Yeah, so you kind of just chucked yourself in the deep end, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And do you feel like that's the best way to learn these days, or do you feel like there's things that you can do before you get to that stage?
And it's always different in hindsight, but when we bought the practice, funding was a lot easier. And the funding that we received at the time was pretty much 100% for the building, and we had to put very little deposit down. So when you don't have much money, you're not taking a massive financial risk. It was a much easier decision to make. This day and age now, with goodwill values being so high, and getting the funding in place, you're having to put a bigger deposit down to buy an existing practice. And even if you're opening up a squat, there's a lot of capital and funding that you need for that. So I think if it was me now, I would need to really understand the business and just make sure it is going to earn the money that I'd expect as an associate. You know, you want to make the same as you have as an associate, if not more. But it's not always the case, because some associates are earning so much money that owning a practice will never generate that much money because it's always going back into the business.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. You know, you have to look at it from both sides. It's a really interesting debate. You know, when you're an associate deciding, do I buy a practice, set up a practice, or do I just stay as an associate? And you get some associates who just have that definite answer, like I'm definitely going to do it regardless. And they're the ones generally who will just go ahead and succeed at it anyway because they're so driven, they'll just go and find their way. And then you get, I think, a certain kind of dentist who likes the idea of it, but they earn really well as an associate. And then they might start to go down that pathway, but actually they might have actually remained better off as an associate.
And definitely I'd agree with you. I think you have to really think about the decision. And if you are a high earning associate, you need to reevaluate whether that income would ever be replaced with owning a practice, or could that income be better used in other investments, which, I have a few associates that have a lot of property, and that works for them. And so that's where they're kind of spending that money and they're happy being an associate. So I think it's got to be driven from within. And I think you'd agree with this, that it's got to be within your why and what it is you want out of life. Rather than just financial.
Yeah, 110%. I always talk about that Simon Sinek stuff and, start with why. It's so important. Why do you want to go down this path? What do you want to do? What do you want to become? And that is your guiding light then for whatever you do going forwards. And I found that out by actually trying other stuff. So before I set up my practice, I decided that I wanted to leave dentistry. Yeah, I was earning really well as an associate, but I was just fed up with it. I didn't like the environment that I was in. And, for me at that point, it was like, what shall I do? And so I actually did that. I went out, I left, I started dabbling in property. But for me, that's when I really found out my why. And that's when I understood that actually, no, I don't enjoy this. As much as I can make money out of it, it's just bloody boring. And I couldn't do this for the rest of my life. And as actually stepping outside of dentistry, realizing actually I love that, it just wasn't the environment that I was in. I just didn't like that, so why don't I just go and build that? For me that was like, that was like seeing the light. I had to pull myself out to kind of see that. But sometimes it can be hard to see that when you're in it 24/7 and you're locked in a surgery all day every day, with patients.
I think what you did was that you by taking yourself out of it, you've reevaluated, but that's a very difficult decision that you made to do that. Not everyone can do that, and so you're working, and sometimes you just do need to just stop, take a break, and figure out what it is you actually want. And if practice ownership is for you, then, what you did would be the right path. Just take a few weeks off, take a month off, and just reevaluate what it is and why you're doing it. Because once you're in, as once you run a practice, your life is taken over. It's on your mind every single day, every single minute, Saturday, Sunday, whether there's work to do or not. It's your business, so you can always do work on it. And it's hard to stop, isn't it, when you're passionate like you?
Yeah, so while we're on the topic of that, now that you mentioned that, what are your thoughts on work-life balance as an owner of a business?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So I have three children, 10 years old, 9 years old, and a 5 year old. So I have a very active family life. And so we've always made the rule that we always try and take the school holidays off with them. That's Easter's, Christmas, and a lot of this, not the whole summer holiday, but quite a few of the weeks off there, so that we have that controlled time. And we are very strict with our phones, kind of come 8 o'clock. We don't really look at our phones. And if you imagine my team is approaching 110 now, the number of people messaging me through Teams or through WhatsApp, it's constant. So you have to learn to just switch off and sometimes just ignore messages so you can focus on your family. And it's a skill that I think takes time. And also the weekends, we very much control that. We don't try and do too many weekends at work because, again, that takes over the whole family ethos. But it is hard, and especially when you first open up a practice, you got to give it your all. It's easy for me to say 10, 12 years on, but, I think when, first 5 years, that was difficult, and it was a difficult to balance it. What I would say was what we have always done over that period of time is focused on having protected time with holidays, and it's our holidays that no one ever contacts us, and we focus on those.
I think that's massively important. For me, during the first year of opening, my wife mandated it that we are having a holiday. I can't say that I 100% wanted to take that time out, but she forced me to, and it was actually the best decision ever. I needed it, and it was great, and the kids needed it. Whereas I got so much in the mindset of I just need to be in the practice, just need to be working. I had to have a reality check. So there's that fine line between, hammering it too hard and taking a back seat and actually remembering, everything else, because it's really easy to get lost in the work. But I think where it sometimes gets confused is that some people go into practice ownership with the mindset of that they're going to have a work-life balance from day one, or that's a number one priority in their life. And, that won't be the case from day one.
No. And you're working to deadlines, so you got to pay staff on certain dates. So if it's a holiday during that day, you're still paying the staff. You still have to have some meetings, so there's no, as much as you try and control certain things, there is deadlines that you have to meet, and so you work towards those deadlines. Associates expect to be paid on certain dates and times and stuff, so you got to kind of schedule that all in and around holidays. And on a number of occasions, I'll be sitting on holiday on a beach, and I'm still doing a pay statement for somebody, because you have to do it. So there's no choice.
It's not a bad place to be doing a pay statement from, though.
No, exactly. It's not a bad place, no, but you'd rather be enjoying your drinks there.
Yeah, no, brilliant. So after you had your first practice, then, so that led you into buying a second one?
Yeah. So the second one was a squat, effectively. So we converted the building. It was a residential building, I think similar to yours, and it was in a conservation area as well. So the planning process took about 2 years just to get planning for that building, because that was very difficult to get planning. Then we converted it into a surgery, and then the same with the third building. Again, that was even an older building, I think 18th century building. Planning took a long time, a lot of people against us converting it to a dental practice, but eventually got planning permission and converted it, keeping within the kind of planning laws. And that was, again, a squat that was just literally a residential. There was a family that lived there before, and then we converted it into a dental practice. The last practice that we bought was in a commercial area. So that was already had its own car park and everything. So that was probably the easiest one to convert, because it was just a blank canvas.
Yeah. So when you went from the first one to the second one, what was your thought process in the decision making to set up a squat then, rather than buying another practice?
We had an NHS practice, like I said at the start, and as I was doing more and more implant treatments and smile makeovers, I wanted to kind of have a distinguished practice away from the NHS, and so have a more kind of patient-centered private practice. So the need was that really, it was the service that we wanted to deliver. We felt we couldn't deliver in purely NHS practice. You know, you could trying to serve two types of patients. So that's why we wanted a squat. There was a practice available actually within the area that we could have purchased. But this was so convenient to the other practice because it was literally across the road from it, that it made it so nice that we could almost split the team up and offer two different services. And you know, it sounds harsh, but it's just like those that wanted private treatment could go to the private building, and those that wanted NHS goes to the NHS building. So you could serve both population types, as well as clinicians who can choose which type of dentistry we wanted to offer.
Brilliant. So what year was that?
That was 2019 we opened that one.
2019, okay. So if we fast forward then to this last year where you just set up another squat, do you want to tell everybody about the new one that you've just built then?
Yeah, so the new one's in the heart of Stoke-on-Trent in a shopping district and a business district. So around our practice, there's a cinema, there's a pub, but we're in a corporate district where we've got a car park there. It's across 2 floors. So the ground floor is purely, you know, dental practice, has 5 surgeries and the usual stuff. And the top floor is our new academy. So the academy facilities has seminar rooms and also kind of eating and catering areas as well. We've started to run a couple of courses there and recently did an implant growth day there. So the idea is that we kind of, as the team's gone bigger, we can do all our in-house training in the new building, as well as doing more external courses for those that wanted to learn how to, you know, how to grow their practices as well. Because I think that's what the number one question I always get is, how do you do more implants? How do you do more Invisalign? How do you grow from 1 to 3 sites? You know, all of these are the things I get questioned on. So, you know, I think our program of teaching is based around those things.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, it's an absolutely beautiful place. You know, it's definitely, you know, one of the nicest practices that I've ever been to. And so going back from that kind of 2019 squat that you built to this squat that you've just done recently, what would you say the biggest differences were? You know, so it's not actually been that long a space of time between the two.
Yeah, the difference is I think now I understand the importance of how big to have it. So for me, opening up a 2-surgery squat practice and it being mainly associate-led isn't financially viable. And I think it needs to be bigger. So the new practice is 5 surgeries, and we know that 3 to 5 surgeries generates reasonable revenue. But also, I think it's making sure that the staff are looked after. If you build a practice all based around dentistry and the patients, it's all great, but you do need great staff to ensure that they're looking after all of these patients. So, you know, in the second building, the staff room was tiny, like a really, really small room. And then as each practice has got, as we've got newer and newer practices, the staff room's gone bigger. The facilities for the staff to get changed have got better. The manager's office has got bigger and better, and the call centre's gone bigger and nicer. And, you know, we don't skimp on those things now. And I think that's been the transition. The patient service has always been roughly the same. We've always focused on the same services. Maybe made them look a bit nicer, but I think it's the staff areas that we've tried to improve upon.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that, because one of my observations, I mean, I've only been working for the last 10 years or so, you know, as a dentist, but one of my observations has been that the staff don't get treated that well in dental practices.
No,
yeah, and you know, not everywhere where I've worked, but from all the experiences that I've kind of seen, and you know, from friends, you know, majority of my friends are dentists. It's just an observation that the team members generally aren't as well looked after as they should be. And you know, that has to be some truth in that, because otherwise we wouldn't be in the middle of such a big recruitment crisis in dentistry, will we?
No, I agree.
I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but
no, I totally agree. And I think that you, as you become more experienced as a practice owner, you value staff more and more, and you realize that actually your growth mindset is only it only works if you've got a team that are behind you, and you've got leaders that are similar leaders to you. So, the team that we've got always look after the staff as number one. That's always their goal.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Your practice is nothing without your team, and you are nothing without your team. And without your team, you have no practice. So, ultimately, you've got to do everything that you can in your power to look after them and empower them to be the best that they can be, and then push them on in their careers. Where I feel in dentistry, what's happened in the past historically is it's actually been the opposite way around. They've actually been pushed down while the dentists have been elevated, and that's led to this massive disconnect, which has led to the recruitment crisis.
You got to respect your clinicians equally to your nurses, equally to your admin staff, equally to your managers. Everyone should be on the same playing field, and then they feel empowered, and then they want to contribute more.
Yeah. So when you set up the new squats, so for people that are starting out in practice at the moment, what were your biggest challenges this time round?
The challenge is because it was a completely new area. It was trying to fill up the surgeries fast. We were very lucky in terms of recruitment of associates, in that we'd established a name as a good practice for associates. So we had associates lined up from day one, and in fact had 4 associates working with us within a month, and all experienced associates. So it was more getting enough patients to fill up the chairs, and then we did. Over the first few months, it was tough. Could fill up 1 chair, but to fill up 3 surgeries within 3 months is tough. And we are doing it now after 4 or 5 months, but it did take some time. So I think trying to get that many patients that quickly is difficult. In hindsight, if we maybe staggered it a little bit and had 1 dentist in 1 month and then a couple of months later another one, maybe we would have had less pressure. But from my perspective, I've just built 5 surgeries to a high level, high standard. I wanted to get patients coming through and using all those surgeries. So, sometimes things take time and take longer than you think, but eventually the outcome will still be the same. You will still succeed.
Yeah. And, for the guys who are just starting out in practice, one of the biggest fears that they have for most dentists when they're starting out, especially starting squats, is, will I get patients through my door? And how do I do that? It's the number one fear. I'm going to open, but nobody's going to come. I had the same fear when I was starting out. Never ran a practice before, never opened anything before, wasn't an expert in marketing or dental practice, and I had to just try loads of different things to get people through my door. But for you, did you have that fear, and how did you manage that?
There's always that fear, but I would say that we're in a very lucky position right now that there's so much demand for dentistry in this country, and you could open up a multiple number of practices and still fill them because the demand for dentistry is so high in the country. So I don't think it should really be a worry. It just may take you much longer. So don't expect to fill up 5 surgeries like I did so quickly. But they will fill and patients will come. And if you offer service like the service that you deliver, Bobby, is phenomenal. And if you offer that level of service and you're passionate about it, then patients will come, word of mouth will spread, and you will learn marketing. You'll learn how to attract new patients. And, we all use similar ways of attracting new patients, but just doing some basic marketing will get some traction. And just every patient that comes through the door as a squat owner, just wow them, because that just spreads the word more so than any marketing.
Yeah. Patient experience is number one, wowing them. Every communication you have with your patient, every touch point, patients walk through your doors, patients walk through your door. Do they look at your practice and think like, wow? Or do they look at your practice and think it just looks like another dental practice? It doesn't have to look, incredible, like the best thing ever. But for new patients that are coming to your practice, if you're opening a squat, it has to look reasonably nice, or there has to be something different, whatever it is. Like, you have to have some kind of USP as to why somebody would come to you over the other 20 practices that are within, a 10-mile radius of you. That's a really important thing that I think some people miss when they're thinking about
and simple things like, it doesn't matter how flashy your practice is. if you get an inquiry, if you answer that inquiry as fast as you can, the chances are they're coming to you. Then you've just got to just give them a nice experience. But if you open up a squat and then you're not answering calls immediately and you're not answering leads immediately and expecting patients to come after you call them 3 days later, then they're not going to come. The minute, you just get past that hurdle, come through the door, then you wow them and just have a reception team that's just friendly and nice and welcoming. The practice doesn't have to be flashy at that point because they're already through the door. All they're expecting is someone friendly and the dentist to be friendly. And if you do those two things, then they will always come back to you. That's all patients are after.
And that I couldn't have said that any better myself. What I've realized is in my practices is that as soon as the patient has your trust, they literally do not care about anything. All they care is that they want to see you again, whether you move into another building that looks like a complete dump down the road or you move to an old school NHS practice. They like you and they trust you. They're going with you.
I know, and you probably know this firsthand. There's some implant guys that place ridiculous amount of implants, and you go to their practices, and it is the worst looking practice with cupboards broken and paint from the 80s and stuff. And the patients are coming back and back and back, not because of the way their place looks, it's because that dentist is phenomenal. The experience that they give to that patient and the type of dentistry that clinician does is so good that word of mouth spreads. And if you're recommended to come to the practice, you don't really care how good the practice looks at that point. You're going for that individual. I want that implant.
It's exactly what they say. Patients remember how you made them feel, not what you did.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's how they feel, when they come out of that surgery. Do they feel cared for? Do they feel looked after? Do they feel respected? If you tick all those boxes and you know how to communicate well, then, you're onto a winner. But in a squat practice, it's every angle you have to cover. It's not one. You can't afford to lapse on any single one of them. When you're starting from scratch, you've got to be hot on every single one of those. Your team, how everybody answers the phone, what the practice looks like. It's a combination of all of that, and then you've got to leverage that and maximize it. But you don't have space to be that forgiving. That's one of the most important things. When you're starting up from scratch, you're on a timeline. You've got costs that are going to be going out, so you've got to do everything that you can and learn as much as you can, as quick as you can, to make sure you've got all that functioning really, really well.
Yeah, and like I said, the patients just are expecting a good service, and when you are a squat practice, if you give a bad service, they are a lot more open about it, because they've not built any rapport or connection with you. So you've got to be on guard and just make sure that every patient is looked after, because, it's all good and well getting the patient through the door and having a fancy practice and just expecting patients to like it. That doesn't mean anything unless you're friendly and nice, the basics of just being it.
Exactly that. And so just to wrap things up, Amit, so if there's somebody listening to this and they're thinking about starting a squat, or they're in the process of setting up a practice at the moment or this year, what would be the top 3 things that you would say to them? Top 3 tips or tricks or hints or bits of advice?
So the first thing is the finances. Just make sure you've done the numbers and you've got the money and you've got a contingency of other sources of income, so that when you do go over budget, because you will go over budget, that you have money to do that and you're not so stressed. Second thing is start your marketing process and research at least 3 months before. You may be working on it longer than the 3 months before, but you got to start implementing it within 3 months of your opening date, so that you've got some patients already ready to go. You don't need loads of patients in the first few weeks. Just having a few and getting some big cases through the doors will then start the traction of getting more and more patients. And then the third one is once you're in it and you're doing it, just believe it'll work. All the other skills about HR and finances and how to deal with you'll learn that as you go along, and you've got so much in this day and age. Principals and other principals are so much more open than they used to be 10-15 years ago. I came from a generation where principals are so quiet about their numbers and how they do things and how they gain patients. Now everyone's a lot more open about it. So you've got so much advice to help you with all these things that you just got to know that you will learn it. So don't stress too much about it.
Yeah, there's a massive community out there now, isn't there, of really supportive principals, practice owners. Even myself, I wouldn't have been able to go down this journey without having other practice owners to lean on, for support. And we're really lucky. And if you don't know those kind of people, there are lots of them out there. Just ask around, go and find them. You can ask us guys. There's lots of people that'll be willing to help you out. Yeah. No, thanks for that, Amit. No, it's been absolutely great to hear about your journey. And I can't wait
great to talk to you as well.
Abbey House again, and see the beautiful practice.
Yeah.
So thanks for all your wisdom, and take care.